Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's so good to have all of you here today with me. Now today I want to talk about something that usually doesn't go hand in hand, and that is communism and gaming. Now a few years ago, I would have thought that the following headlines we see here would be a joke. I mean, China bans kids from playing online video games during the week. 3 hours a week. Playtime is over. Playtime's over for China's young video gamers. China imposes the world's strictest limits on video games. Now, as a kid, if my mom made me put down the controller, I would joke about living under a communist dictatorship. Well, turns out sometimes communist dictatorships take these jokes very, very seriously. Now, the only thing I would change with these headlines here, maybe just a little bit of critique here, is maybe I'd put the word communist in front of the word China because, at the end of the day, China is a communist nation and it is run by the CCP, or also known as the Chinese Communist Party, which has been running the show for quite some time. Now, personally, I used to like gaming a lot. Like a lot, a lot. As a kid, some of my fondest memories are hanging out with friends, playing video games, and drinking Capri Suns. I mean, it's just, I had that prototypical American childhood where I played a lot of video games and I got really good at some of them. And I've played like some titles 10, 20 times over and beat the game from start to finish, like Legend of Zelda. I used to compete against my friends on Smash Bros. And like just we used to get together and like do weird things on Grand Theft Auto, right? I enjoy video games. And as I've gotten older, I've slowly grown out of it. But by no means would I ever discourage kids from playing video games today because I had fun as a kid. Other kids are going to have fun playing it, right? But to create such a law and to tell parents and give them such a comically low number of hours to play these games, it just kind of shows you the soulless, empty, idiotic things that big governments and particularly communist governments can come up with. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is just because of how stupid it is, and not because it affects the United States or, like people around here, but because it's just interesting to see how creating blanket social policies like this will always, always, always lead to backfire. And it doesn't matter what you ban. Because at the end of the day, if you don't create alternatives for people to overcome the kind of societal or social behaviors you want to try to avoid, such as video game addiction in this case, then will only add to the resent of the population. Grown ups and kids alike use gaming to have fun, and a small percentage of the population will use these games to escape, and an even smaller percentage will develop an addiction, just like any other. They'll create a detachment from reality, and that's bad. But then again, you always need to create a route out, an alternative escape. Now, myself personally, I used to have video game addiction, and that's probably the reason why I wanted to talk about this article is because video game addiction is something very real, right? I used to be addicted, absolutely addicted to League of Legends, okay? And I might make another video of how I escaped that addiction, but in general, I escaped my League of Legends addiction by first finding games that were a little less intense than that game, right? And then slowly finding activities outside of that game so that I would be able to do, such as hiking or going to church or getting more involved in my academics and trying to get better grades and trying to set goals outside of the game that would help me get out of it, right? And understanding that I did have an addiction, right? That I would spend entire weekends, okay, just playing a video game and, and just doing nothing and then realizing like that's not going to lead me to anywhere and it's not going to give me any major accomplishment or any sort of healing in my life, right? That there was so much more that I could do in the world than just play video games, right? And that's me coming from a point of somebody who's been addicted before, okay? But again, nowhere in these articles are there any solutions, just prohibitions, right? Is China looking to add after school programs to develop sports or anything like that? No, because they just want to put a blanket ban in front of the people and just expect that nothing would happen, just as any tyrannical government would. Now, the deeper question that I want to address and talk about is the question of communism. And I feel like we should talk more about just how bad communism is by using this as one of many examples of the kind of policies that communism creates to try to solve a problem without providing any alternatives to the already existing problem, right? Because if you're going to ban something, you got to have a way to get these people out of video gaming, right? Instead of just creating a blanket ban and forcing people to suppress their feelings and ideas and thoughts, because fundamentally they're trying to escape something. There's something there within a communist oppressive society. And the young people of China know that. That's why they're getting addicted to these video games, is to get away from something there, right? And this is kind of what I want to highlight on this channel more going forward, is just having this rational, level-headed discussion about how bad communism is and how we should not ignore the consequences of it, both historically and the fact that it exists in the present day, and just how bad it is, and that how we should not be casually prancing around calling ourselves communists or socialists or any of that matter without truly understanding the deep historical and present day meaning of what that actually means. For example, if we're going to talk about communism, let's talk about another one of China's genius ideas, which is the one child policy that has completely strangled any future prospect of growth in that society. Look at this population pyramid, okay? For example, part of this pyramid here, why it's so narrow, is because you had the Great Leap, which killed millions and millions of peasants and farmers in China through the process of starvation and forced industrialization. Okay, and then currently here's the second great problem that they've created past the Great Leap, which should be called the terrible leap because of how many people it killed, is the one child policy. And look at how many more men there are than women in the society, because in Chinese society, men tend to be more valued than women. It's just an honest fact, okay? And you can't have a disparity and in this kind of a ratio between the sexes and then expect to have a functional society, because a functional society requires the growth and the prosperity of families. Families are the most fundamental building blocks of a society. And if you have millions of men that are getting left out of the process of building families and having kids, then you fundamentally erode the fundamental meanings of what it means to have a society in the first place. So then why wouldn't you, as a young man or a young woman or whoever in China, it doesn't matter, why wouldn't you play video games from dusk to dawn to escape one of this many cruel realities created by a communist government? In that example I gave is just one of many sins of communism. Another major sin of communism is religion, and how communism is really, really good at eroding traditional values and religion and replacing it with state control. Okay? You can't have a single state run government without having something that could potentially compete with it. In this case, religion is one of those things that communist governments just cannot stand on any level. Okay, the Soviet Union tried to eradicate religion. It was the first thing they tried to get rid of, and China is trying to do the exact same thing. And if they could have their way, they would make this whole chart read out red and completely atheist. Okay, and this chart's a little funny, by the way, just a little side note, because they say Chinese folk religion or unaffiliated, but it doesn't go down into break it down into Taoism or Confucianism, or like list atheism as a separate thing, which I find kind of interesting. But if we read the data here a little bit further, then we see that according to 2012 Gallup poll, 47% of Chinese people were convinced atheists. A further 30% were not religion. In comparison, only 14% considered themselves to be religious. And more recently, a 2015 Gallup poll found that a number of convinced atheists in China to be 61%, with a further 29% saying they are not religious compared to just 7 who are. So somewhere between 14 and 7% of Chinese society actually practice any form of religion or traditional values. And tradition and traditional values, you need to have those in a society because those are the building blocks of those who came before you, right? And there might be too much traditionalism can be a bad thing because it creates rigidity, right? That's a real term. And it makes it hard to adapt and change to certain things. But a complete lack thereof, creates a disbalance because it erodes the principles and the disciplines that other people have used and other teachings that we have had from people who came before us that we can use to apply to them today. And that's just one of many things. So if you create a completely atheistic society that doesn't have a fundamental belief or structure, right, or tradition that you can pass on from generation to generation that defines you culturally, socially, and religiously, then what do you really have besides empty, vapid commercialism, right? All you're doing then at the end of the day is just working to survive, to not have a family, as such is the case here. To what extent? To what end? Right? And that's where like I kind of want to talk about this a little bit today is because it's kind of interesting what's happening here and the kind of approaches that are being taken to just blanket ban things and to assume that somehow this is going to work to fix more fundamental problems. And broadly bring it back here and talk about how you need tradition and you need beliefs in something in order to have a functioning society and how it's important, right? And how we shouldn't just, like assume that just blanket bans on anything, whether it's happening over there or here or anywhere else, would immediately solve the problem. That doesn't do anything. Okay. And that's kind of one that I wanted to highlight today. And again, I'll talk a lot more on this topic in the future. And so for now, I'm just going to leave it here. If you made it this far in the video, let drop a like or subscribe and let me know if you like my content. I know that with my content I'm all over the place, but I'm gonna try to slowly figure out the vibe on this channel and then hopefully we could build a good community and talk to each other and have a good time having like really interesting discussions. Again, thank you for stopping by. I really appreciate it, and I'll